So, our next speaker will be Wiebe, and he's a blogger, a community gardener, a seed saver, and a plant breeder. His garden, together with the network surrounding his blog, is a small-scale alternative to modern industrial farming and commercial plant breeding. And it's a process that promotes biodiversity and seed sovereignty. So, another, let's say, food growing talk. It's a big concern, and it's in that first block that we're talking about how things are at the moment. Later on during the day, we more and more go to what is possible and what has already been established. But I'd love to see from the previous speakers too that there is so much more possible as long as we want it, not they want it. Okay, so Wiebe will speak about the pragmatic approach to creating your own local agriculture, simply and at low cost. And he's, I think, talking on small-scale initiatives, social interaction, network of local farmers. Is he around? Is he there? There he is. And he's going to give, I give you a few minutes more, just so you are more relaxed, and I don't have to push you, okay? There you go. Come on.
Okay. I'm going to talk about different kinds of seeds, first of all. There are commercial seeds and there are non-commercial seeds. And I, as an independent plant breeder, I work with non-commercial seeds. Commercial companies produce seeds according to their business models. And what that means mostly is that means commodity crops like rice and soy and corn and wheat. And since the same companies that sell the seeds also sell the chemicals, there's usually an inherent dependency between the two. So, for example, you have Roundup-ready crops that need Roundup. There are many other dependencies that can be created between with commercial seeds and their chemicals. Also, commercial seeds are very uniform. They're intended to be grown in large monocultures. They frequently have things like thick skins for easy transport, and things that maybe we don't find so tasty when we eat them. As independent plant breeders, we have other goals. From the beginning, we work, almost all of us have exclusively organic gardens, organic places where we work and we create the plants. We like to promote biodiversity. We create plants that are adapted to our local growing conditions. So what that means is that everything else being equal, if you grow a commercial seed next to one of our seeds should do better in the environment in which it was created. We also like to preserve old varieties, and this is something that there's a lot of interest in now, but by adapting them for modern use. And the next slide that I have is an example of this. In general, if you take an old variety out of a gene bank, hundreds of years old or 100 years old or whatever, in general, it's not suited for modern agriculture. It's great to grow in your garden. It's great to save the seeds and trade with other gardeners and experiment with a bit. But it's not really suited for agriculture on a commercial scale because since the seeds were grown, our climate has changed. Diseases and pests have evolved. And so these seeds in general have to be brought up to date before they can actually be used in agriculture. And that's one of the things that, that independent plant breeders work on. So Alan Bishop is a corn breeder, and he has a variety of corn called Astronomy Domain. And this variety of corn has about 200 individual varieties of corn within it. And most of them are old varieties from gene banks. And this variety of corn, it's variable. And if you plant maybe 100 or 1,000 seeds, all the plants will be a little different. And in total, most of the genes that were in the original plants will be in the plants that you're then growing. So what that means is that by growing, eating, and buying this corn, you're helping to preserve these varieties. And there are environmental and health benefits to eating a biodiverse diet as well. So there's a sweet corn version as well as a version for dried corn and meal and so on. And people are working on versions adapted to different local climates. And while the yield is not as good as commercial varieties, the yield can be compared in many ways to commercial varieties. The yield is really quite good, and it's quite commercially viable to grow this corn. So Tom Wagner is a potato and a tomato breeder. And besides all of the amazing colors and flavors and biodiversity in his creations, he's also been doing a lot of work on disease resistance. So potato blight was the disease behind the Irish potato famine, and it remains one of the most serious diseases in agriculture today. And it's the number one food source of pesticides in Europe. And literally tons and tons of very toxic chemicals are sprayed into the environment each year. And this is also a disease, also a problem with tomatoes. And it used to be thought that you couldn't have both a commercially viable tomato and a blight-resistant tomato. But Tom has proved everyone wrong on that. What's important is that with the work that Tom has done together with other people who are also busy breeding tomatoes and potatoes, you don't need a genetically modified potato for blight resistance, and we also there are enough resistant varieties available now that we should stop using the chemicals. They're just not needed anymore. Okay, Tim Peters and myself we're working on perennial grains, and in particular, I'm working on perennial rye, and I'm very excited about this actually. Perennial grains are different from traditional grains because in the traditional model, what you do is you first plow the land, and then you sow the seeds, and then you wait for the plants to grow, and then you harvest them, and then the next year you start all over again. But with perennial grains, they keep growing year after year. So you don't have to plow the land each year. You drive the tractor less, which means that you save on fuel that the tractors run on. But maybe most importantly, the land that's not disturbed will sequester carbon, will sequester greenhouse gases. And land that is disturbed by plowing will release greenhouse gases. So there's really a very large net savings in greenhouse gases by growing perennial grains over traditional grains. Now this perennial rye that I'm working on, it's very similar to grass. In fact, it doesn't need good soil. It will grow pretty much anywhere grass grows. It's a drop-in replacement for a lawn. So if you live in a house with grass around it, you can grow this perennial rye instead of the grass if you want. Right now, currently the yield is about 1 kilogram for 25 square meters. And I hope that with breeding we can increase that about 10 times. And that means it should be possible to grow about 1 kilogram of grain in the space of a large single-person bed. And a kilo of grain has about 3,000 calories, so that's food for one person for a couple of days. Like Alan Bishop's corn, there are hundreds of varieties within the plants that I'm working on. So now you have to ask the question, why can't we buy these foods in stores? And the answer is this. These are primarily things that a small farmer would grow, and a small and local farmer. And the rules and regulations that small farmers face are overwhelming and make it almost impossible to grow things like this. For example, to begin with, the seeds for everything that I've shown you tonight are illegal in Europe. And we're working on trying to change the law, and hopefully the law will change later. But you can't grow seeds that are illegal. But beyond that, subsidies always favor larger farmers. So a farmer that tried to produce these things would encounter cheaper alternative products that would make it impossible for them to make a profit. The other is that the equipment necessary to grow and harvest these sorts of crops on a small scale for a small farmer are all but unavailable, and governments really need to intervene in order to make sure that this equipment is available at a reasonable price to farmers. But finally, it comes down to us as consumers. I mean, it happens often that a farmer will put their heart and soul into growing something like this, and nobody will buy it because it's different. And as consumers, we need to learn to both expect and accept that food is different from one place to another and one store to another. But also we need to get used to demanding it. Because if we don't, then we'll just continue to get the same standardized food that we get now. So if you'd like to learn more, or you'd like to even participate in breeding projects, I hope you'll visit me. My blog name is in this presentation, or you can easily search on my name and find it on the internet. So thank you.